everyone. Welcome to the Y Axis podcast. I am your host, Tristan Ivor, and I have the pleasure of having here with me today Anatoly Yakovenko, someone I consider a good friend and one of my inspirations in the space. So thanks for coming on, Toly.
Thank you for having me.
This is great. This is maybe one of the fifth interviews, how many clubhouses, I'm not sure. So I will do my best to not only talk about things we've talked in the past, but we probably will talk about some of those things as well. I sort of want to start with you, which is a little bit different from how I usually start, but I want to understand where your drive is still coming from. I mean, that may sound a little trite, but a lot of the founders from your cohort kind of like left and went off to do other things, and they gave up or they retired, and they kind of took off. Why are you still here? I mean, you're just
Oh
grinding day
man,
in, day out.
that's a good question. I think I like seek stress. It's kind of a and like yeah, I think that's like I've always kind of had like a low, heart rate. Probably should have been like an emergency room doctor or something. So like I think not not doing something exciting and like being in the middle of something and taking on like big swings that are risky, that are going to be stressful. It just feels like what I enjoy doing, I guess, even though like in the moments when the risk is very high and it feels like everything's going to fall apart, it is definitely like gets pretty dark, like, but then you kind of go through those and then you see the other side of it where everything seems like it's finally working together, and that's pretty exciting. I don't know. Yeah, it's a really good question.
Well, just so you know, we are glad you are here. So we
Yeah.
we greatly appreciate it. Sorry, let me close this.
Vitalik is still here. There's
That's
like
true.
Zaki's still here. There's awesome founders that are still, I think, in the space and pushing and trying to build something.
Yeah, let me close this real quick. Someone's hammering. I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah, and speaking of moments of high stress, I know we just went through the crucible all together, but before we get into that, there's something I always want to do on these podcasts with you, and I think it's really important for people to get a sense of maybe why we're working on these problems or why it matters or what the difference is, and that is what Solana is and what it's trying to solve for. And in that light, I would like to ask you, what is Solana if you look at it in comparison to perhaps EVM blockchains or Tendermint blockchains like Cosmos? Like, what is Solana that sets it apart?
I think um there's like a philosophical difference maybe, and in that like Ethereum comes from a lot of the sovereign money, kind of like self-sovereign money world, where it's trying to be ultrasound money and equivalent to Bitcoin, but better because it's programmable and can do more things. And from that lens, Ethereum is really, really trying really hard to be a very cheap to validate settlement layer. And settlement is like kind of a very boring thing in finance. It's like the final step of any transaction where somebody changes the ownership of something. And that's kind of the core foundation of like this idea of a global settlement layer, and like having these other layers built on top of it that talk to Ethereum. Um, the way that I came into the space is that, especially because of my background working at Qualcomm, I looked at these systems as like communications networks. This is a way to connect a bunch of people and synchronize state between them. So I always looked at Solana as like this place where you have a chunk of state around the world, like a bunch of bits, and you want to keep it consistent and synchronized as fast as possible at the speed of light. And that's the value add that Solana provides. It's not this idea of like it's decentralized money. It's that it's a communications network over the shared source of truth for the world that's as fast to synchronize as possible. And to build that thing, you actually building it in the decentralized way is the only way to do that, because you really want to give guarantees to anyone in the world that connects to it that they have the exact same state as everyone else. And if you have a centralized service, then somebody will favor somebody else. Like you kind of lose that, like you lose those guarantees if you actually try to do it like through Google Spanner, right? Google gets the data before everyone else. That's actually really, really bad in finance. If you know that somebody, like some market maker always is ahead of you, you're never going to be able to beat them. Um, so for a lot of use cases, that idea of this giant censorship resistant message board that's perfectly synchronized at the speed of light is actually really, really important. So I never thought of Solana as money. I thought of it as we need to build this really hyper fast state machine. And that turns out to be pretty useful for everything else in crypto. Like people really like high performance, low latency networks that are permissionless that can do all those stuff you want to do in crypto. And I think Sol has emerged as money because of the use cases built on top of it. For whatever reason, people didn't use at USDC to buy NFTs, actually prefer Sol. And that to me was not like something that like I expected to happen, right? Or was obvious that would happen. It's just people chose to start using it because it's kind of like became the currency within this ecosystem. And I think this is kind of like maybe the fundamental difference between how I've always viewed the network and how a lot of people that try to build blockchains take on that problem is they're like, okay, Bitcoin is a very successful decentralized money. I want to build a decentralized money with feature XYZ. And my thought was always like, build a really, really good system that people want to use because they derive value from it. And this idea of decentralized money is like, I think, emergent in anything that's permissionless. As soon as you have the ability for anybody to communicate with everyone else, some form of decentralized money will take form. It may not necessarily be the L1 token like it happened for Solana, but I think it'll just emerge on its own because of the permissionless nature and the shared state. So that to me was always like lagging in an indicator of product market fit. The people are using Solana as money was after the fact that it was useful and stuff like that. So like if you want to think of like Ethereum, the number one thing that they really care about is like we want cheap validation because we're the world satellite layer. So they constrained themselves like on the validation problem. What we constrain ourselves on is like we want to synchronize as much state as possible as at the speed of light around the world. We want that like single chunk of memory that everyone can agree upon. That's the number one constraint. And then maximize decentralization, everything else, make validation as cheap as possible, obviously, like do all the optimizations we can to make it as cheap to verify and the cheapest hardware. But like as long as it doesn't break that property that you have this like single source of truth that everybody can agree upon at the speed of light around the world.
So, a question on that, just talking about this initial vision of it being this message bus or message board that synchronized instantly across the world, and then it slowly becoming somewhere where people transact and actually use Sol as money in some shapes and forms. From maybe a philosophical perspective, do you just think that is like the base human nature of wanting to transact that brought that about? Or if you had to guess, like what made Sol go from just being kind of like the gas token to allow this messages to be all over the world immediately to be something that's used as money? Where do you think that came from?
I mean, honestly, NFTs, I would say, and it's kind of NFTs are very a cultural phenomenon, and people like as the first kind of mass multiplayer game I played was Ultima Online,
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as you had people all using the exact same state machine, even if it was centralized, you kind of had culture and money and barter systems form just on its own. Like even if the system itself didn't support it, but because people are all in the same kind of world, people wanted to have flair and like cool drip or whatever, right? And like they would just start trading stuff, and like people figured out like ways to like start building these like commerce on top of it. That was literally at one point I was mailing a cashier's check to a random person in the United States to go pick up an item in the digital world. Just like bizarre, right? But like it happens as soon as you have enough people all talking to each other in a single place and kind of hanging out long enough. I think NFTs did that for all of crypto, and they took off on Solana because it was really just a much better experience, much cheaper for artists to mint and experiment. And even for the collectors and traders, we saw that like they were literally trading like 3 to 10 times more often on Solana than they were on Ethereum because of the speed and the low cost.
So you hit on something there, I think, which is super deep, which is this representation of what happens when a certain amount of humans come together on the same playing field. And obviously, reality is that one playing field. And this Ultima Online example you gave, and that's one of the reasons I'm most bullish on digital assets, is because I think we're moving into this digital age where we're all in this digital playing field together. And you kind of, I kind of wonder what are going to be the representations that allow us to do this commerce, to do these trading. And I find it hard to believe it's anything outside of crypto and NFTs. So thanks for sharing that. I thought it was really insightful.
You'd see like TikTok and like more like user generated platforms with UGC content kind of capture some of that, like Roblox. They've kind of created little worlds where they have economies that they're running within their environment. Um, and they like the downside to those is that like all of these big companies tax like a lot of that environment. It's like 50% on TikTok, I think 50 or 30% on Roblox. It's just a massive tax on like the users and their content creation and like all those experiences. And maybe that's okay. Like, I mean, it does take a lot of developers to build up software and a lot of services and stuff like that. But it feels unfortunate that the tax is so high and that the users don't really actually own any of those things. They're like really just like experiences instead of assets or digital objects that you take any ownership of, like you did in Ultima Online. You like felt like you owned your little sword and your, like bow in your house, right? Because
Right,
it
but
was persistent.
if those
Right,
servers went down, that was it. You would
right.
never see any of that again.
But for like, it was as persistent as could be. You could experience it from day one to day two and like go mess around with it. And that persistence gave it like a feel like you over like you the same feeling that you kind of have over real objects.
Yeah, I think what one viewpoint in NFTs I found sort of interesting is a little bit of the composability layers you can create with it. I don't necessarily think borrow lending is that great for NFTs. I think it's like pretty risky and liquidity sucks, but it's very cool that somebody can grab an NFT and go get liquidity from it using this other composable protocol, which is a property you can't really do within centralized systems or centralized games because they just don't interact with each other. Do you think NFTs at some point will have this property that allowed Airbnb to be what it is, which is like if you had a house, you could rent out your house
And
through
so,
Airbnb? Like, will you be able to start creating stacked layers of things with NFTs over time?
yeah, um, I think the standards could have something like borrow lending and things like that built into them, like being able to rentable NFTs and stuff like that. That would be pretty cool. I think you actually could probably implement this with Token 22. I think there's
How
enough.
would that look? Yeah, actually, well, great segue. What is Token
Yeah.
22 and what's going on there?
Token 22 is like it's named Token 22 because the development started in 2022. So it's almost 2 years of development. A bunch of features that were missing from the original token implementation that people wanted to try. So there is a way to do transfer hooks and like a mint authority that can like take over accounts and stuff like that, and a bunch of other different hooks that give the issuer of the token more or less control depending on what they want to do. You can obviously set all those things to zero, right? And it behaves just like the original token, but there's a lot of functionality like what you described. Hey, what if I wanted to rent my asset? Well, you could withhold like some authority to be able to claw back that transfer, and then I transfer my asset to Tristan, who now then has control of over like my you know monkey JPEG, my SMB, and then goes into and does whatever Tristan wants. And if you fail to pay the rent, I then take it over and claw it back. So stuff like that, I think, is pretty awesome to implement
Yeah, I mean, it creates a lot
as
of fun
features.
games, right? Like at the end of the
Right.
day, it just creates cool economic game theory dynamics. I'm curious if
Yeah.
will the standards merge? Will like SPL and token 292 become one thing, or will it be optional for people to just, do the regular SPL library or do token 22?
Well, they're compatible. So token 22 is binary compatible with the standard token. So if you don't need any of the token 22 features, you basically don't even have to think about it, except that the way that you should write your program is that the user should be able to specify which token implementation they're passing through.
Got it. And as long
So
as, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and like when you create those pools or mints or whatever, like you can configure them with token or token 22, and it should work out of the box with either one.
Got it.
If you're using just obviously token features. But once you start using token 22 features, then you obviously have a dependency on token 22 compatible programs.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask. So like different protocols, if they integrate or incorporate token 22,
Yeah.
then they'll just operate in the same way they would with the regular Solana tokens, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Backtracking a little bit to this question around Solana design decisions versus other blockchains and how you're thinking about it. I know you've been pretty active on Twitter lately, just talking to people, really, people who are fudding or people who have critiques. I'd be curious, what do you think the two most common critiques are, and what's your answer to them, or like what do you find yourself repeating over and over again?
Um, People don't know how decentralized Solana is. It's literally has, I think, the highest number of validators, and they also don't understand the security implications of that. So, like, what makes networks secure? It's not economic security. It's not the number of validators voting in the sense that like what percentage of them it takes to agree on something. It's the sheer number of full nodes. Because the way that these networks work is if all but one full node is corrupted and is trying to create an invalid state transition, which is like take all your coins or whatever, the single full node that sees that invalid state transition, that's all it takes to go and prove, hey, look, the rest of the network just signed an invalid ledger. It's now like being malicious and faulty, and no one should trust its output. And this is why like Circle can issue arbitrary number of dollars on Solana, regardless of the Solana's market cap, because their single one full node is the only full node they trust. If 100% of the stake, 100% of the validators are corrupt, it's impossible for them to convince Circle that you spent your dollars. Because they can't forge your signature, and the Circle full node will reject any invalid ledger, and the PagerDuty will go out, and they'll be like, hey, something's wrong in the network. And then like people will figure it out. So that's really kind of the core principle of security, is that the number of full nodes that you have on Solana is like close to 3,000. I think it's like 5 to 6,000 on Ethereum. So about half as decentralized as Ethereum. So the core settlement thing that Ethereum is really, really focused on is provide those really, really strong settlement guarantees. Solana does that at the same order of magnitude as Ethereum already today. So kind of think of them as both equally secure. So that's kind of the first misconception. The second one is that people don't kind of understand why Solana is so cheap, or like why they overestimate how expensive it is to run a validator. They think it's like costs tens of thousands of dollars. No, it's like $350 for a modern day validator. Yeah, they always kind of look at our stats, and I guess don't realize how many users actually use the network and how easy and cheap it is to build on it at this point.
Yeah, it's one of the things that surprises me the most is even if you didn't want to do a deep technical dive, you could just go to Twitter and try and navigate through the Solana ecosystem, and you'd see very quickly the amount of energy and
Yeah.
users that exist there. And I think it's pretty easy to extrapolate that out to, oh, wow, this is probably the third most active ecosystem in all of crypto. So probably should be paying attention here.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. The decentralization one is one of the ones that I see the most. And just to make sure I understand, the reasoning there is that they say that, oh, Solana has, or excuse me, Ethereum has all of these validators, but they aren't all necessarily full nodes. So it's a false equivalency to say
So
that
so
those.
You can blame Zaki for this. He named them validators because they are validating attestations from full nodes
Mhm.
to before they vote on in consensus. So Ethereum's 600,000 validators are equivalent to the stakers on Solana. It's the number of people staking on the network that point to a full node, and they trust that full node to give them a guarantee that the network is operating correctly. So there's about 600,000 validators on Ethereum, but I think there's about 300,000 stakers on Solana, and those two sets are effectively have the exact same function. The number of actual machines with a copy of the state that can prove that the rest of the network did something wrong, there's about 5,000 on Ethereum, about 3,000 on Solana. And it doesn't matter if those nodes are validators that are voting or just full nodes that are running an RPC server for Backpack, or like some DAO, like, or like NFT projects, like that people stake with. It doesn't matter which one it is, because no matter where you get the data from, it's cryptographically signed, and it's as if you received that data yourself. As soon as you verify those signatures, you know that it's authentic, and then you can see that like the rest of the network did something wrong and it's corrupt. So that's kind of the core principle why these systems are so cool, is that you're not relying on an honest majority. You don't depend on the fact that more than half the nodes have to be honest or anything like that, or more than half the stake, which would means you're relying on some economic security or anything like that. None of that matters. What matters is, can you prove that the rest of the network committed a fault? And you prove that by sharing its data and its cryptographic signatures. And you only need a single honest node to do that. That's why security is so scalable here. And that's why the sheer number of actual full nodes is more important than the number of stakers or validators or any of those other stats.
Got it. So even with 3,000 full nodes that Solana has right now, it'd be near impossible, or basically impossible, to get to the point where you could corrupt the entire blockchain.
I think even a Tendermint, which runs at about 100 full nodes usually, it's really, really difficult to corrupt all 100 at the same time. Like, because that's really what it would take. So I think a lot of these systems, even smaller ones, are very secure. And I've actually never thought that the full node count was it's kind of, again, like one of those lagging indicators. When you have Solana got popular with a lot of users and use cases, and that's what spurred people to go put up a bunch of nodes. It's the fact that they're like Magic Eden that runs nodes because they need to serve the data to their users. All the NFT projects, all these other like people that are like messing around with the network and getting value out of it, each one of those runs a full node because they need access to the data and the state as fast as possible. And that kind of like demand to run a node is organic, and it's really, really important because in some cases, like Circle, they need that state because they have billions of dollars that have been issued, and they 100% need that state to be correct. They will definitely like throw alarms if something goes wrong. So the more of those people that are watching the chain have real businesses that are deriving value from the chain, that are using it, the more secure the network gets. And that's like kind of shared security pool across the entire ecosystem. And like what's been really cool is that like Ethereum folks have done a lot of research and came up with this idea of light clients, where users that are not running full nodes can sample these full nodes and get guarantees that the data was not withheld, that the data was actually propagated to a large part of the network. And then you can say, okay, well, me as a light client, I know that the data was transmitted to everybody in the world, not just a single node that I'm talking to. And I know that none of those nodes fired an alarm saying that this has been corrupted, so I can trust this output. And that's kind of like this been really cool research that I think will scale that security even more to a very large number, a very large audience. And there's like a team called Tiny Dancer working on that on Solana.
Mm-hmm. I've seen the Tiny Dancer
Yep.
team. What are some use cases that people would use a light client for?
I think basically wallets should be like clients. Like when you and like wallets don't even need to be the first ones to implement it. Either a dApp or a wallet could do it. It's just when you click submit, you interact with a dApp or you send a transaction and you get that confirmation symbol. You can also have like a little timer that's like, okay, waiting for a light client to detect if there's a fraud timer, like until that fraud timer expires. Like once you have that, you basically have very strong security guarantees for users that are casual users that are not sophisticated enough to run a full node. And this is, I think, like the philosophical difference between like people that I argue with on Twitter. Honestly, not even with like the core engineers from Ethereum. It's that making making it cheaper to run a node does not mean that more people will run nodes. Like reducing the price of something does not mean more people will use it. It feels like it should, but it only if the demand right was blocked by price. But in
Mhm.
reality, demand is blocked by actual need. Most people don't need or want to run nodes. Um, they are not sophisticated enough to do it. Like it doesn't if like you had like full nodes pre-installed on like Dell computers, they're not actually all that useful if the person has no idea what that full node does and if a virus just erased all the data on that computer. Like they actually have to have some understanding that they're running the node, that there's data integrity that needs to be maintained, and that like if something happens that they need to understand like that they can no longer trust the network. So a light client puts that all in a package in a protocol and like a little UX symbol that says okay or not okay to a casual user. And that's actually, I think, super important. But that light client relies on competent operators around the world. They're all independent, of which one of them is at least honest. So this is where like I think this idea of like reducing the cost of a node does not make the network more secure. It's having demand for competent operators to run full nodes in large numbers that are independent, that do the job of like monitoring the data, making sure everything's okay. That's what makes the network more secure. And you can get there by making the network so useful that people just go do it. Like, and this is, I think, where Solana has been successful because it's so cheap and so fast. People actually use it, and that means they really, really care that the state is correct, that when they mint those NFTs, that their users get the NFTs that they expect and stuff like that. And that actually creates that shared security.
Yeah, I think the societal transition that has to happen for individuals themselves caring and wanting to run these things is them understanding what that actually provides for the rest of the network. I think like outside of maybe like people who torrented a lot and used to seed and stuff, it's hard for most people to wrap their head around why they should do it themselves. So that will have to, I mean, hopefully it happens at some point, but I do agree right now it seems like most of the people who are putting the energy and time are people who are actually providing services to others through the blockchain, and thus they need to have the validity of what they're doing. Um, do you think? Yeah, actually, that's maybe a little tangent, but do you think people will get to the point where they want to run either light clients or full nodes themselves just to make sure that they have a true copy of what is happening? Do you think that would take like massive, maybe government mistrust, or like what gets people to care about this?
I mean, I think like the really cool thing about blockchain is that the barrier to entry to start a business that is globally connected financially is zero. Like it really reduces the like all the overhead that you'd imagine of like being able to transact with anybody in the world. The APIs are much better, much more programmable than anything like PayPal has ever built. Like it's just awesome. Like as like a payments financial like kind of programming environment. And that's gonna drive people to like, hey, I'm in Brazil. I want to like go be part of this. Like I want to build products that are globally scalable to the entire world that are financial products. You can do that out of Brazil, out of Africa, out of the US, and now instantly address this entire global market. That in itself, I think, is going to force people to run full nodes. And that I think that's enough. And like because those people are running businesses, they're deriving value from these things, they're like really going to care that the network is robust and secure. So we just really need more growth in crypto, and like or the our growth to continue. Despite this bear market, you still see like tons and tons of products being launched, like and tons of entrepreneurs like entering the space and like taking a swing at it. So like I think whatever it is, it's already happening.
Well, it's what you said. It's just the barrier to entry is so
Yeah.
low, and corporate capture hasn't happened yet. You don't need to go through any systematic processes to get into the space. You can just come in and put time and energy in and actually make something incredible happen, which I think there's very few industries left like that in the world.
And I don't think corporate capture is possible. This is like, I think the coolest thing about protocols is that the value of decentralization is that it's not run by Amazon. It's like run by a bunch of different parties. Because if it was run by Amazon, they would be under like real regulatory like duty to go and manage all of the state and the processes on this thing and comply with all these laws. And that doesn't mean that decentralization is some kind of like way to get out of regulation. The whole point of decentralization and transparency is that things are automatic and transparent and open source to that nobody's running it. And that means that nobody is actually in control of your finances. That these like you no longer need the like those regulations don't apply because you as a user with your private keys, you have full control over those assets. They never actually left your private keys, right? You're interacting in a peer-to-peer way with somebody else because all you're doing is using a protocol, right, to communicate. That's really the cool part. As soon as Amazon is the only like thing that runs the protocol, it's becomes their state that they're fully in control of, and they're the intermediary. And this is where I think like the really, really cool thing about open permissionless blockchains that makes it really hard for somebody like a big company like Amazon or Microsoft to really take them over or to even provide services that are equivalent.
Yeah,
They are not able to do that, not unless they build just really run an Ethereum or Solana node. Like
that's a really
that's,
good point.
yeah.
That's a really good point because the way I was thinking of it was more so along the lines of if I want to be an investment banker, I have to go study finance. I have to do the investment banking internships. I have to learn how to use Excel really well. I have to go do my suffering as an associate. Like there's all these steps you have to do to be able to enter the industry. And I was thinking more from the perspective like, oh, would crypto that's what I was thinking through corporate capture is just like you have to go through a systemic process to get to the point where you can interact with it. But actually what you just said made too much sense to me, which is you can just be some random kid that knows how to program in Africa and you can just spin something up and it doesn't matter what other
Yep.
processes and you can still get traction. So that, yeah, I think you just changed my perspective a bit on that. um I remember one of the earliest Solana pitch decks said NASDAQ on the blockchain. um there's a lot that has happened obviously since you guys started Solana, started fundraising. There's a lot that's happened in crypto, also just generally in the world. Has your view updated to thinking of it in a different fashion, or is that still potentially the end goal of where this goes?
So that's been more or less working. If you go to like birdeye.so, you can literally see the difference between number of trades in Solana pools and Ethereum. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a single trader that does like 24,000 trades and like in a day. It's because it's automated, and like the top pool on Ethereum does 2 trades a minute. Like it's just the fidelity is just literally like orders of magnitude different. It's pretty crazy. Like you, like people think that Ethereum like Uniswap is very popular, right? And there's a lot of demand, but the top pool literally does 2 trades a minute. It's like hundreds per minute for a single like active trader on Solana because they've automated it. They're actually using it like a NASDAQ system. So, and this is where like that idea of a single global chunk of memory that's synchronized at the speed of light. That's where that pitch blockchain at NASDAQ at blockchain at NASDAQ speed, NASDAQ at decentralized NASDAQ kind of came from. Because what's cool about it is that like this is again a very kind of long-term goal is that imagine there's some news event that happens in Singapore. That news wire has to travel at speed of light through fiber to a trader in New York that looks at it in their Bloomberg terminal, right? Or the machine looks at it and then activates. Well, at its like final stage, Solana will actually have a transaction propagating at the same time, speed of light through fiber. That was injected by some block producer near Singapore and is now propagating around the world. By the time the machine detects that newswire in New York, the market in New York already adjusted, right? Or that machine is what caused that adjustment. Well, the market on Solana already has that transaction propagating through, like that already took that news, like, and like did the trade. So the price is basically the same. There's no arbitrage between New York and a market that's running on Solana. And that's really, really cool to think about it, because Solana is just, a bunch of computers run by like random people around the world, and a protocol. And it's able to provide the same kind of value as the best markets, in the world, like New York Stock Exchange or like NASDAQ. So that's kind of the end dream state. And I think for like crypto, it's really important to have that like single source of truth, because that will keep all of these other like implementations honest. Like when you have a lot of folks that are taking compromises around sequencers, where a single machine has full control over how blocks are packed, and like slow networks where the block producer has 10-20 seconds to create a block and extract all the mav out of this block. If you have this reference point that is cheap and fast and has an accurate price globally, people will not send their orders to these systems that extract a lot of value, and then will send them to this one. So it'll keep, I think, all of crypto honest, just to have Solana.
So in some sense, the everyman has equal access to that trader from the top trading firm that's sitting there co-located or something.
That was literally my dream. I used to trade like as an amateur, and like with all these like half-baked APIs and interactive brokers and stuff. And every time I had like thought I had like an algorithm that could be a winning one, I just noticed, oh, somebody's getting in front of my trades, or it takes a little too long. For just the trades that are profitable, always took longer for my orders to go
If it
through
was
than
a
anyone
loser,
else.
you would just go through right
Yeah,
away. Like,
exactly. So, and like the data would take a little longer to arrive from the markets when it was important. So you always kind of get like shafted as an amateur. And I thought that like what was really cool about decentralized systems is that they really equalize this between everyone. You are on the same level playing field as like Jump or whatever, trading on Solana.
so that's definitely entrepreneurial view to, messing around with this, trying to set up some trading systems. That makes me curious if you had a sense you would do your own thing, because you did go a very traditional route. You worked for traditional telecom companies, you worked for Qualcomm for a very long time. Did you have a sense that you would go all in on a business that you yourself built?
Honestly, yeah, I've always kind of had like something on the side. I've had a bunch, like dozens of projects that I've worked on, and this was the first one that I felt like we had to go and like full time and like race for and get like really good engineers for, because in that time in 2017 there was just so much hype around crypto and layer ones and alternative like consensus systems that um there was no way I could have done it like as a side project. Like it was just like either I would have done it then, or I would have been too late. If maybe it was like 2014 or whatever, like I could have maybe like done it as like a side open source project, then it would have slowly taken off. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I think it was like the time where a lot of like really smart people left their jobs at these big tech companies and entered crypto. And you kind of see the fruits of that now. Like you see all the zero knowledge research becoming more mature, and like all these other systems coming online, and like it's pretty cool to see how much people have accomplished.
But I'm sure you had people telling you, hey, you have this awesome job at Qualcomm. You're in such a special position. Why would you go and do this? What was your
Uh,
self justification?
Honestly, my wife, she was at a startup during the social media boom, and literally her like the founder of that startup did not want to sell the company to Mark because they thought they could beat him. This is right at the start. They were out in Colombia. Facebook was out in Harvard, and it was just such a flash in the pan moment in time that if you were to start a social media company like 6 months later, you were just like not even in the competition. So from her perspective, was like you can't do this as a side project. You got to quit your job and go full time or drop it because you're actually gonna miss the opportunity. So she was the one that like kicked me out the door, so to speak, to go do it.
Oh, thank God for amazing wives. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome. She's like, see, honey, I told you.
yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So totally, we've all been through the crucible this last year. It's been truly a roller coaster. It's, I think, made a lot of people very disheartened, but it's also made the people who had the guts and the courage to come out better than they ever were before, is my opinion. I think if anything, it's strengthened, it's solidified the Solana network more than anything else in the past, probably because it just showed people that it can go through hell, and the community is still there, and the builders are still there, and the team is still there. What are some of the perhaps largest lessons that you took out of this? Um, yeah, just curious over the last year for you.
I mean, like, um, we like the stuff that I thought we did well was that we always focused on grassroots growth and like grassroots developers. So like, and it kind of happened organically. The first Hacker House was at a Breakpoint conference, and people liked it so much. You were like, okay, we better do a bunch of them. Like it wasn't planned. It was a lot of it just like seizing the opportunity of what the community was doing and just helping it grow like as much as we could. And like that was, I think, kind of the thing that saved us was like like having that community that we were able to nurture. And I think it obviously wouldn't have been there if like the tech wasn't like a superpower for these devs. Like I think a lot of reason why the devs build on Solana, it's chewing glass sometimes. It's not always like the easiest place to build a product. It's getting a lot better thanks to Anchor, but like it it is super cheap and super fast and very scalable, and you don't have all three of those like in any one place anywhere else. And because the devs feel like they can go actually like build scalable businesses, that's what that's why they stuck around. Like I've talked to like a bunch of DeFi founders that are building central limit order books, and like during the worst part of this cycle, they're like, well, yeah, we looked at a bunch of other chains, and it's just worse everywhere else. Like we just can't build this product like we have vision for. So to them, like the core thesis of a really fast programmable single state machine is really, really important. So those are like the folks that I think carried us through like the crucible.
I think one thing people don't realize about Solana is how many net brand new crypto users came in to Solana with NFTs. So to give you an example, anecdotal, but my wife has 3 friends whose first crypto interaction was buying NFTs on Solana. And right now, this was maybe like a year and a half ago, a year ago, they're still absolute Solana NFT degens. It's like
That's
it's
awesome.
turned into their full-time thing that they love doing. And I think there's a lot of those. I think there's a lot of people who, trying Phantom and Magic Eden was the first time they tried crypto. And it's going to be really hard for those people to feel satisfied in other places because they've just onboarded with this wonderful experience. And this is sort of a tangent into getting into the question of what do you think needs to happen for us to get more of these people? And we've had this conversation a million times. Maybe it's the same ideas, but how do we continue to get more people into Solana, into crypto in general, from your perspective?
You got to build products that people like, and probably new business models. So like I think like dialect and drip are pretty interesting like approaches. Um, with drip, it's a subscription artist model. Like you kind of have like an Instagram. You can follow an artist and you subscribe to them and you get airdrop free like NFTs. And because of compressed NFTs, they're able to do this in scale. They've literally minted 2 million NFTs last week. Their total is over 10 million. It cost them about $1,000. Um, this is real world numbers that are of a business that's minting like crazy. And that is an interesting new business model that you couldn't build it anywhere else, and it's somewhat pretty scalable, right? Because you have users that are not financially committed by default. They go and subscribe to an artist to they get free art, they're enjoying it, and that art may have a price because it's an NFT and people trade it, and that may get them to go and like maybe buy some of the higher quality art, or like that artist makes, right? And figure out new ways to like even just royalties from those trades funnel um, money back to the artist. If that scales out to an Instagram size kind of like subscriber base, that would bring in 20, 30, 50 million people just from that thing. But this is like still, pretty early days. Like I think they have about 600,000 wallets that are active, that are participating. So it's a sizable amount, but it's not 30, 40 million people, or like Threads had like 100 million people in 5 days. How does crypto get that kind of result? Is like we need really, really good products that people actually want to use. And that's going to take some time.
Yeah, like mixed
Um,
with the luck of virality too, which is a crazy
yeah.
part of it. It's very interesting how even if you have the best products, it needs sometimes that little spark, and it's such an unexpected spark most of the time. Actually, I keep sending you tangents here, but I know you've been really interested in memes for a long time, and you've thought about them. You've thought of them from the perspective of meme tokens that just bring enough people together to have mass movements and things of that nature. What's your sense on what the current crypto meme is? Like, how do you think the outside world is viewing crypto, and what are some things you think we maybe need to change there?
Um, Sorry, can you repeat it?
Yeah, totally. So you've been looking at memes for a long time.
Oh
I
yeah.
think memes resonate with you quite deeply. I'd say you understand them pretty well, and you know which ones to feed into. And this has probably just been through experience over time. But I'm curious what you think the outside perspective of crypto is right now. What's the meme that people think of us? Because this may help people start shifting that.
I think the next generation of people already get it. They're very meme oriented. They grew up on the internet. And I think we have like an older generation that is like gets memes, because I think memes are just part of human culture everywhere, but it's not something that I think they see it as like a driving force in like consumer decisions. I don't know.
Mhm.
Like I kind of see um like memes as a way to form community, form tribes, like right online, and like really come together. And that has happened, I think, all throughout history. It's just much, much faster now. And like it's much scalable on like social media than ever before. And crypto, I think, takes a lot of advantages of that. Like I think crypto Twitter is like one of the core bases of crypto. Like I think if you can't succeed in crypto Twitter, you're gonna have a very hard time succeeding in like the crypto like ecosystem as a whole. Um, I I instinctively like memes because I think I just grew up with the internet from the 90s, and like the first real usage of things were like bulletin boards with like people posting like funny memes and like dunking in each other. It's like it's almost the world hasn't changed. Like you went from a bulletin board to Twitter, the UI is basically the same.
Do you think memes have to be representations of sort of archetypes that resonate with people, or things that just deep down inside of humans there's a reaction to, or can they be net new things?
Um, I think it's always spoofing on each other, and like kind of like uh if you look at like meme evolution, um there's something gets funny, and then like people will riff on it, and then you see like a week later like a fourth level derivative that is somehow referencing the original as like the thing that goes viral, right? Like um I think I don't know why it I guess in a lot of ways it kind of reminds me of like I don't know if once you have kids, they sometimes will get like a joke that's like the joke happening in the preschool or in the first grade or second grade. Like all the kids are just laughing about this one thing. That's the meme that they like developed. And then like 2 months later, it's like a derivative of that original thing. So like as soon as people start like having fun and like laughing and whatever, like I don't know. It's just kind of the way it goes. It's hard to explain. I don't know why memes are so tied to crypto. It's just maybe because we just stare at like computer screens all day, and that's the funny thing that grabs your attention in that moment.
Yeah, I think it has to be things that get past our autopilot or make us
Yeah,
stop for at least a second
yeah,
and reflect on it or think about it or realize or try and realize why it got a reaction out of us,
yeah,
which is the hardest thing to do as a
yeah.
meme creator or meme maker is what will get a rise out of people. What do they care about? And one thing I've noticed with crypto Twitter is that it's so dynamic. It's very, very rarely one thing consistently over time. There's just a new flavor every day, every few days, and it makes it really hard for communities in crypto to actually like stay on top of that. And one thing I think will happen over time is as crypto companies become better and better meme makers, or crypto people become better and better meme makers, we'll continue to hit further and further out into different audiences. Like, you know, you sometimes you see Elon retweeting crypto stuff, and I think it's because crypto just makes really good memes. um, and I'm going to use that as a segue into trying to get your feel on Solana. Right now is this decentralized network. It has all of these third party builders, all of this community, all of this energy from people putting their time and resources into it. How do you guys navigate that as sort of a foundation that's here to support this decentralized ecosystem? What are the things you are able to do? What are the things you guys try and take a step back on?
You know, the community is basically like always moving faster than us at this point. It's been kind of really, even like during the depth of this bear market, we noticed that like everything that we were trying to do, there would be somebody that would launch it before we even like got halfway. Just like so product wise, it's been really tough. I mean, for me at labs to be like, okay, we need to build this product because the community can't do it. Like there's not enough devs or expertise to go unblock this thing. Um, I mean, I guess that's a really good thing, a really good problem to have. On the kind of like building side, I think like hackathons have been just awesome. Um, and like a well-oiled machine at this point where we can have like a global event that gets a bunch of devs together and that showcases like what people are thinking about, what problems they're trying to solve. And that helps us guide like, you know, like what libraries we need to build and things like that. But um generally like it's something that I I'm like surprised how hard it is to actually know what we need to do and like how fast the community is doing it on their own. Um, I've always kind of looked at it as like a technology problem. Is there like a thing that we can build? The last one was compressed NFTs, and like I'm waiting for that like next blocker. Like what is it that's actually blocking people that they can't like go do something awesome? Um, you know, like ZK is like really really cool and interesting, and like we could spin up a ZK team at labs, but you look at Light Protocol, they already shipped a ZK SDK, they shipped a compressed ZK SDK before I even like did the research to figure out what product we need to build. So like just people are moving much faster than I can even keep up.
That's a really good problem to have. I think at least on the Ethereum side, what Vitalik did is he just went on a sort of tour of talking to people and trying to educate them and telling them, you know, why they're building this and what they're building. And I've seen you doing that a lot more on Twitter lately. I've seen you sort of just taking the time to, you've always done this, but you're doing it
Yeah.
more. And I think it's really, really valuable. Is that you just realizing like, okay, maybe part of my role now is just to help people with education because people actually read what I say.
Does that mean I'm not writing as much code?
Hey, you said it. I didn't say it.
Yeah, writing more tweets than code. I think the way that because of because there's now multiple teams that are building the L1, the way that I try to get changes it and like the L1 itself is just bigger. Like the only way for me to actually get protocol changes across is to propose them, like post a SIMD and then talk to people and try to get consensus across all the different teams that are building like the L1 itself and building on top of Solana, and then like slowly move it forward. And that just requires a lot more communication. Basically, like, yeah, if you think of Solana as an ecosystem, it grew to a point where it's like a big company, like, I don't know, 10, 20,000 people, and you're like an L7 that needs to go make a change. You got to go talk to a lot of people. And like you're like,
Uh,
hey, I have this really good idea which that impacts like 20, 30 different teams. This is the proposal, and you go like shop it around. um which is a job I used to do, right? That's fine. But like, yeah, I think it kind of naturally ends up there on any big open source project. Is once the open source project gets big enough, you kind of need somebody that is like trying to get consensus on technology changes and move it forward.
so for labs, then it's potentially just continuing to try and see, well, obviously core blockchain development and stuff of that nature, trying to pass new updates, but also trying to see what products might make sense to bootstrap in the ecosystem. And then from foundation, it's a support network for the existing projects.
Yep.
Is that a good way to think about it?
Yep. Labs, like when we can, we try to build products that can be spun out. Like Metaplex is a really good example. Solana Mobile is another one. Like it's things that nobody in the ecosystem was doing at that time. And once they're up and running, there's usually actually doesn't make sense to keep in at labs because there's like a passionate CEO that like kind of effectively got them going, and it should really be a separate company. So we try to actually keep labs as like a true labs, right? We actually just build companies ourselves. um and that's not it, and it doesn't mean that there's always like one that needs to happen. It's kind of like the interesting challenge is that like we may be at a time where we see a lot of the ecosystem already handling things.
And then on the foundation side, this is like a place for us as builders to come and interact with for support for different things. Is that a good way to think about
Yeah,
it?
they
Or
do grants, they do hackathons, and do a lot of the community events, Breakpoint and stuff like that.
cool. And then for people who are interested in working at labs, are you guys hiring right now?
There's always open hire for like really good systems engineers. If you're like somebody that really geeks out on like low level networking or disk or memory or virtual machines, yeah, definitely reach out. That's easy hires.
Cool. Well, you heard it here first, folks. So what's going on with Saga? You brought up Solana Mobile there for a second. I have a Saga phone. I think quite a few people in the ecosystem have Saga phones. We got some Mad Lads engraved on Saga phones. How are you feeling about it? What's the state of the project right now for the company?
um we had like really good feedback on the device. Like our surveys like had over 20% people respond and just rank it like this is like an awesome device, and they love using it. They love the seed vault integration, and like so the feedback has been awesome. What's cool is that like you saw Google announce that they're now allowing NFTs in their in their app store. um like honestly I have no idea what made them what forced him to make that decision. I do know that like we weren't building in a vacuum, that like obviously like Google's aware of like efforts like Saga and stuff like that. So my hope is that like they actually like are taking the space more seriously, and they see that high quality products can be built that are very crypto native, and they can start taking the technologies like Seed Vault and incorporating them up the stack. That would be awesome. um for Saga, what I want to see is like devs build an application that is like really uniquely takes advantage of native self custody, and like really drives people to go want it from like a phone. That's what's actually going to make the big difference for Apple, for Google. If there's like an app that people want that has dependencies and self custody, and that's like really important for the user, that it's secure, right? And they will choose the Saga device over anything else. Um, we haven't gotten, I think, there yet, but I think like stuff like dialects there's like early signs where I can see like if dialect gets big, some percentage of those dialect users are now have more value at risk, right? In their as part of their social graph. It's not just their friends, but it's a bunch of NFTs and a whole bunch of other stuff that's now part of that social media stack, that they will want to secure it with like MPC and like Seed Vault and all these other technologies.
Yeah, I'm also really excited to see people start just using camera and geolocation and
Yep.
these other things that phones provide. On that note, with this new Google update for NFTs and with Saga and these different mobile possibilities for crypto apps, we're starting to get a lot more conversations with people wanting to build xNFTs for mobile first. And I'd be curious, are there any xNFTs you'd be excited to see that you think people should build? These could obviously be applications on Saga as well.
Probably like I think for NFT projects, I think they need like community to do stuff. And I would love to see are like games and like casual experiences that are fast to ship for like an NFT project and a community that keep the community engaged and like generates more memes and like stuff like that. And I love the feature in Backpack where you like have a chat like directly from your NFT. You can go talk to all your friends and stuff. And I think figuring out ways where games and applications can all plug into this kind of same environment, I think would be really, really cool. And obviously it has to work on mobile because most of the time you're kind of on your phone. You're rarely like kind of, you're at work on your desktop. But even then, like for casual fun things that you want to do with like your internet, like Mad Lad friend, you probably want to use the mobile device. Um, and I think like being able to ship those experiences is what's going to keep the community engaged and keep and like get more new people brought into it. And that's I think really, really like the difference between like a dying NFT project and a growing one is just the engagement. Are you getting more new people like in and like participate? And you gotta ship, I think, software ideas, memes, right? You gotta ship memes, right? to keep that going.
Yeah, one thing for us has just been really hoping to get mobile out as soon as possible because I think that really unlocks for most people. It's crazy because I
For
talk a lot
sure.
with the Solana communities in different places like Vietnam and now Japan and Germany, and even then, most people just use mobile for all their stuff. So for them, like the desktop stuff is cool, but it's not as accessible as they would like. So I think that is actually a really big bull case for Saga is like as we move more and more digital, more and more mobile, I think more people are just going to want to have phones where they can do all their native crypto things without having to kind of go sit down at a computer. Um, Crypto's changed quite a bit since you've joined it. We had the whole 2020 Paul Tudor Jones Bitcoin halving cycle. It kind of came crashing down. We had Sam exposed as a huge fraud that he was. We recently had Larry Fink come out and file an ETF for BlackRock. There's been a lot. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster, a lot of ups and downs. Have your core views or perspectives of the direction that the space is going in changed at all? Do you feel similarly to how you felt in the past, and where do you think we're heading?
Oh man, that's a good question. Every cycle feels like it has its own like set of schmucks that like blow up. I think um there's a lot more product oriented people like previous cycle and even so now. Like I think that that's basically happening every cycle as we go from big ideas that are kind of hard to put down and an opportunity to like I think for people to overpromise and like and under deliver to like products that have to go live and like actually get users, and that's where you start seeing traction is like in the in much later stages of product development. And that's like I think the healthy part of every cycle being kind of washing out um those people that are just there for the hype and no product development to continuously just having this like crop of builders that are really, really focused on shipping stuff. And so far, for what I can tell, like this cycle is not driven by white papers or promises. It's literally people that are like shipped a product that's really good, that's gaining traction. So my suspicion is that like every every cycle gets the higher chance to break out into the mainstream. Like this next one is going to have the highest chance with the best builders that have been through like the crucible and like and have built in the bear market and really figured out those like product market fit loops that actually create value for users.
And as we have more teams building and more teams coming into the space as fresh builders, any words of advice you could leave with them just from the experience of scaling Solana to where it's gotten now and seeing so many of the different projects in crypto either make it or fail?
Um, I guess it's kind of like regular startup advice. Paul Graham's essays are awesome, so just go read those. um, I think ship products, and like I would say delay shipping a token unless, like, the only reason you should have a token is if there is a KPI, like a KPI in your product that accrues value, and the token can reward that value. Um, and that that thing that the users get the token with actually controls that value creation. So there's like a nice loop. And you can think of like the Uniswap LP as like the perfect example of that. The LPs like deposit their assets into the Uniswap pool. They effectively control that pool, right? They take on all the risk, and they should somehow get rewarded and be able to like collect fees or something, right? Like get something out of the risk that they're taking through the tokens and through the rewards, get a higher share of the fees or whatever. So that pool already has product market fit before you add any incentives. Like, you actually have to figure out, did this thing that I build, is there already like useful value creation happening with users, and like get your first 100 users, and then start thinking about token incentives and really try to maximize like those incentives towards a KPI that really matters. That's kind of like, I think I would say the biggest difference between crypto startups and non-crypto startups is that a lot of times crypto startups make the mistake of launching the token first. And like without a product, without knowing that the product is going to succeed and have product market fit. And once you launch the token, you're kind of stuck. You can't, it's very hard to pivot and change the product and like actually do much, and you end up with shipping something that doesn't actually create any value. So get PMF even with 100 users, and like really figure out what are the incentives that and your rewards and things like that are going to drive.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And then my final question for you is on a personal level, it's what habits or lessons or things have you taken on perhaps in the last few years that have made your life better, that have allowed you to continue working better, continue family relationships in a better manner?
I used to be like an Ironman long distance runner. Like, I was running 60 miles a week, and my back hurt like crazy after I took a break. So slowing down running to start a startup and have kids, for whatever reason, I think all my muscles just went like you're no longer constantly working out. And lifting weights has basically saved me. I started like basically Olympic weightlifting, and it's been awesome. Like I've actually didn't even feel this good when I was running all the time. So that's been like a pretty big change. And like mostly don't drink coffee or alcohol. So like for a founder, that you really shouldn't have time to like, like losing sleep should be a big deal, and being hungover should be a big deal for a founder. You should just not have time to afford any one of those. So which should cause you to quit both. Coffee's harder, I think, for some, but usually it means you're kind of burning the candle on both ends, so you might be close to burnout if you really need caffeine.
Okay, wait, let's talk about this coffee thing for a moment because I think this is very controversial here. What was the reasoning for you to decide to wean off coffee? Because I knew you love
so,
coffee.
so I'm particular because I tend to drink too much of it,
Mhm.
like tea or coffee. So a lot of people that just drink one in the morning, they go to bed fine. They kind of have like that loop figured out. I will like, I'm a person that like stays up and needs to like go and like brainstorm, and I like will stay up till sometimes way too late. And if I have coffee, the next day I will compensate, and that means I'll stay up again. Like, I just don't reset. Um, and like that's just part of my natural kind of like behavior is I drink too much coffee if I'm drinking caffeine.
Okay, how much?
But
How
if
much is too much? How many cups do you have in?
I had like at one point I was drinking 7 espressos a day, which is a lot. And this is because like when I'm in my creative phase, I actually don't sleep, and that's fine. Like, I go write a bunch of code or a big design or whatever, and I like pace around the house. But then the next day I'm tired and go to sleep, and I like pay my debt. if I drink coffee, I just never pay that debt, and it just like accumulates until I burn out.
Did
So
someone tell
like
you about this, or was it a self-driven decision?
self-driven decision.
All right, well, that's a
Having
big one.
kid, yeah, also having kids means that like being tired really, really sucks. So like that having anything that interrupts my sleep, I would just cut all those things out.
Okay, one more. As a founder, where time is so important, how do you figure out the balance with kids and family and spending time?
Honestly, like once you're at that stage that you're having kids, it's actually easier to be a founder because you're only just focused on two things, like the work and the kids and family, right? Like so like dating, I can't imagine being a founder and dating. It just sounds horrible. So like in some way, like once you're at that stage in your life, like you've kind of actually have very little variables in your life and you can focus on just those two. The kids do take a lot of work and like no matter what, but a lot of times I take calls and then holding a baby or like I'm walking around with one and it's fine. No one's gonna be that mad at you.
No, I just think it's great. I mean, I think it's one of the best
Yeah,
things we can do is have kids and
yeah,
raise them right. So
yeah,
huge kudos. Well, totally. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for coming on the Y Axis pod. I appreciate it.
for sure. All right, man. Take care.